What is up, everybody? Solomon here. Super excited to be with Genfinity, interviewing a multitude of builders across Web3. Well, it's not often that we get Ben and Benjamin together for a Constellation Hypercast, but today is one of those days. We're going to be diving deep into the weeds of a bunch of different stuff. I think without any pretext, maybe we just hop in. And how's everybody's summer going? We were talking about that just briefly before that. Everybody's kind of in the doldrums of summer, wondering how to continue. And maybe I'll kick off with that.
It's hot.
Yeah,
it's everywhere I know it's hot. You know, the temperature's hot, but yeah, it's interesting. And I'll hand it over to Jorgensen here in a second, give his opinions on summer. But you know, we've been so heads down and so pumped up and excited that I've gotten tapped a few people. It's like, hey, you might want to pull your head up and just kind of like, you know, get on a screencast here and talk about some of the stuff you guys are working on. So that's why we wanted to do it. But there certainly is a lull right now. Anybody I'm reaching out to, it takes them a little while because they're off God knows where with their kids. But that's what summer's about, right? Better enjoy it. But what are you seeing, Jorgensen?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely this malaise of the summer slog, whatever you want to, summer slumber, and it happens every year. Like I literally, for somebody that has so much energy and just like handling multiple different perspectives, I hate the summers. It's like this time. It's this time to. Everybody's like, yeah, summer's here. I'm like, dude, it's the worst time. Community gets anxious. They're like, what's coming out? What's the next big thing? But that's like everybody, right? Like, look at it. You go through the first 6 months to set up the next 6 months, and it happens like right over 4th of July in the US, and there's just this like slowdown that happens, and it sucks. Like it's not fun. Everybody's just like taking a deep breath from what happened the next 6 months, and they're like, well, I guess I get to get charged up for Christmas, before Christmas and the New Year's. What do I have to do? So I think that everybody's feeling this kind of like slog going on, right? I mean, even like Bitcoin hits an all-time high, like over and over. ETH is rebounding. All these like good things happening in our ecosystem in the world. You've got U.S. government like, you know, fighting right now to push something through before their recess happens. I love that they call it recess, by the way. It's such a childlike term that they like stick to. And but so there is this like, take a deep breath, like let your blood pressure. We were just talking about blood pressure. God, we're getting old when we're talking about blood pressure, you know? So
my blood pressure, even before these podcasts, is always, I mean, Elon's got to stop making changes to Twitter and X. I just pushed the podcast manually to Genfinity's Twitter, manually to my Twitter, because Twitter is like breaking with podcasts right now. But yeah, blood pressure. Go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe we need to go back to the days of Ev Williams running Twitter, and then Jack Dorsey running Twitter, and then the next tech giant running Twitter. You know, I don't know. Maybe that will cool our blood pressure. But yeah.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, go.
No, I'm just surprised. I mean, I think this doesn't directly tie in, but I think, you know, even with like a platform like Twitter and all the stuff that Elon has said that he's going to try to do, like, I'm still amazed that we're sitting here in like, you know, almost August of 2025. And we, you know, I'm sitting here worried, like trying to run media, you know, stuff and do podcasts and stuff, and like not being able to know if if the video is going to work. It's like crazy, dude. It's like 2025 right now. And like Twitter is like a behemoth of a platform. And I'm like, I'm going to try to do some workarounds on my end to see if I can get this video. So
oh,
like,
dude, don't even get me started. Like when we had our account compromised, there was no customer support. We had to go to the ad sales representative that we didn't know. And then I'm like, wait, do we trust the ad sales representative? I don't trust ad sales people in general, but you know, so here we found ourselves like we had to find somebody at the company that was a human to help us through this.
I was going to ask,
like such a missed opportunity, I think, you know, because I think that you really could probably do some very similar stuff to what, you know, YouTube is a kind of a bastardized platform. When you're doing content, you really get a lot taken off the top. But I don't. Anyways, we're pushing this stuff manually across all channels. Anybody that's watching this right now, super excited to have Constellation co-founders Ben Jorgensen and Benjamin Diggles with us here today to talk about this. What's going on in the summer of crypto? Even like yesterday, with the Genius Act and the Clarity Act, it just seemed like people were just kind of expecting something not to go through. And then all of Twitter simultaneously is just like, oh, like we're just waiting another day. And then we're like, here we are again today. And it's like, I don't know. It feels like we are kind of dragging through the slosh though. And, what is it kind of like?
For sure. It's like we're like looking for somebody to fight or champion, right? And it could go either way really quick.
I think they are fighting, that's for sure,
yeah.
right? Like we have Altif is on the scene, right? He's boots on the ground because Ben and I are up to our eyeballs in bureaucracy right now. We just got a ton of stuff going on, which is fine. So God bless you, Altif, for being out there on the hill. And his updates are almost like a WWE sort of dialogue or narrative of, oh, this person was just shouting at this person in the hall and these people are saying this about this. You got these people on the phone. Of course, I'm obfuscating names because I don't want to leak all this stuff. But God bless you, LT, for being out there, and probably one of the most instrumental weeks in crypto right now when it comes to the House and in the Senate and Congress. And then, of course, we had the one big, beautiful bill that dropped, what was it, like 10 days ago. So things in D.C. right now are hot and spicy. So I understand why everybody in crypto is on bated breath, but that's also one of the things that Ben and I want to talk about today, because we are absolutely bullish as can be, because we know what's happening within the legacy and what's happening with institution of why this is so important. But we can maybe touch on that a little bit later on here. But what are your thoughts, Jorgensen, on how you want to move forward?
Yeah, I was going to kind of set what are the trends happening right now? I think that's an important starting point on when I look at the past 6 months. Now I'm looking at the next 5 years and where this industry is going, where we're going, what kind of tailwinds do we have? It's everybody knows that this administration has created a pathway for institutional adoption. People are more comfortable with crypto. They see the use case. They see it's going to be around for a while. There's more uses for it than we've ever dreamed of. Circle IPO, one of the most successful IPOs ever. We're seeing Michael Saylor's crypto strategies starting to be implemented across hundreds of different companies, whether it's an ETH strategy to build the treasury or Bitcoin. Like it's starting to make its way into mainstream society. And so one of the big things, that's already happened, right? That's already happening. So what's happening now? Because we have these tailwinds, especially Constellation, this is what I can really speak to, is we're starting to talk with institutional capital to really build momentum around our ecosystem and our vision, because our vision is very different than the Solana ecosystem that is really one around this kind of online casino, insatiability around making money. It's got a very simple directive that your customers, your Web3. And I like to talk, when I start talking with institutions, they want to know where it's going. They don't want to know where it's already been and who's already won the race, because that doesn't matter for the next 10 years. And so everybody I've talked to, family offices, venture, are really asking, what is the next big pivot? And because of all these tailwinds, we're starting to see organizations or legitimate industries that have a linchpin on different verticals start to look at this technology as a way to cross-pollinate across different verticals and add accretive value. This is that institutional adoption of the core technology, where institutional adoption is happening and has happened with crypto as the product. We're now starting to look at blockchain as the product, and how can that be interwoven to evolve digital infrastructure, evolve paper infrastructure, companies that primarily operate on paper, and start to set those standards. So the conversation is really shifting more towards what more can this technology do other than just mint cryptocurrency. And that to me is very exciting, because that plays into the Constellation thesis that we had so many years ago, and that we've stuck through, that, hey, there's more that can be done than just a cryptocurrency. A cryptocurrency is icing on the cake. It's going to struggle with liquidity, as is every major market does, and some capacity struggles with liquidity. But the core technology can be a backbone to so many different industries and verticals going forward. And so where I see the future going, and kind of setting the stage, is that I see that there are strategic alliances that Constellation and other blockchains that have a more utility-based focus, or their product is more focused on the core rails, talking with these institutions that have a hand in so many different verticals, whether it's like real estate, military, healthcare, and I mean, name an industry that can start to look at new technologies, AI, blockchain, to really add more value, standardization, and be cross-pollinated across different industries that they already have a good knowledge of, or they have strong investments in, and they need to evolve those verticals. That conversation did not exist 7 months ago.
Right.
That is something that is happening right now, because everybody has already looked at cryptocurrency as the product. Yeah, we get it. Okay, here are the token on it. Here are the things that make it successful. We get it. That seems messy, but we already have value across these existing companies. How do we reshuffle value in a way that brings these technologies to life, and that we control the liquidity? It's a very different mindset that I see rapidly taking shape, where, like I said, companies have vast portfolios, and they're looking to enhance these portfolios, especially portfolios in traditional industries that you see a 2 to 3x multiple. Just think like beauty care, healthcare. They all have, construction. They all have roughly 2 to 10x price per earnings ratio. But when you look at tech companies, they have anywhere from 10 to 30 plus price per earning ratio and multiple. And so everybody's trying to think of not just what is like, oh, it's cool to do a digital transformation, but how do we reshuffle value into our existing legacy entities and assets, and bring accretive value through this new technology that can be cost effective, faster, cheaper, and potentially unlock new liquidity in different ways. So I'll take a pause.
I was going to just briefly mention, I kind of randomly pulled this up, but I randomly pulled it up because it's an example of like some of the documentation that literally comes out on a daily basis. Like, I've been trying to do a little bit more digging and finding content, and like kind of making like even just like personal YouTube videos like I used to do. Like, really doesn't matter what it is, but like I look into like I like finding like NWOE like central bank documents and figuring out what the powers that be are talking about. And they're all talking about the same thing, but like European Parliament put out like, this digital capital markets union. They're talking about this digital capital markets union now, like a month ago, which is like basically tokenization, distributed ledger, blockchain, all this stuff. And now the UK basically has this competitiveness strategy leading out to 2035 as well. It's talking about new forms of asset issuance, new forms of asset transfer, new forms of asset ownership, applying tech, adopting blockchain, distributed ledger. And I guess the only reason I really bring that up is like, we all know that that's happening. It's kind of like the writing's on the wall, but it's been interesting for me personally to kind of look at this stuff, because there's been a very clear rhetoric shift from these entities. If you would have looked at what, the UK or House of Commons or anything out of the UK was putting out 5 years ago, they weren't talking like this 5 years ago. Neither was the Bank for International Settlements, neither was European Union or European Central Bank. And now everybody's like, oh yeah, the writing's on the wall. So it's
and I like to preface why. Like, let's go back to natural human instinct. the why was never there for institutions. You had more bullets that said, here are the risk factors to using crypto blockchain than it did offer value. What Michael Saylor, I think when you look at what Michael Saylor proved out with his corporate Bitcoin strategy, was that Bitcoin on your books, aligned with government regulation clarity, would offer a multiple over your existing company's earnings report. And in many ways, MicroStrategies is traded based off of their Bitcoin, and nobody really knows what MicroStrategies does, but something to do with data and something that's similar to Palantir. And so with that, that was the foundation. So if you could prove that holding cryptocurrency would offer a multiple on your earnings in public markets, the next layer to that, now that we have that established truth, is how do we arbitrage the technology? Okay, cryptocurrency blockchain offers a multiple on your earnings. That's great. He established that watermark that allowed the next Y for the next generation to say, okay, if we acquire, we merge, or we add these technologies, we're essentially arbitraging existing legacy industries with this new technology that offers a multiple. It trades at a multiple within a corporate setting. And so it's fascinating because what he also proved was that holding Bitcoin in a corporate treasury had more value than an individual holding Bitcoin in their personal wallets, meaning it adds a trade multiple onto their existing stock. So the same thing is going to be happening in the future. Now that that's established, that why, it's not just about like, oh, this technology is transformative. That's never the reason innovation happens. It happens because of greed. It happens because people can make more money and they can arbitrage. Yeah. Like that's the basis of everything. And this is the next frontier, is looking at bolting these technologies because they're able to arbitrage against their existing portfolio and their existing linear growth on different verticals.
I think one of the concerns too, like, I mean, at least this tends to happen, and I've seen it happen. I mean, I think it's kind of, I guess in a way, it's valid frustration from kind of community standpoints, and this is like across the board in all of crypto ecosystems. Like, I think we've been in. I'll put it this way: I think if you would go back to 2018, 2019, even 2020, and you would see like a partnership announced, it was almost like in 2018 that would have driven stuff for like 3 to 6 months. Like pick any network that had like a partnership that was like worth its weight in salt, even though it directly maybe didn't relate to like the underlying asset on that network. Like think about Ripple and think about what happened to Ripple and XRP within like the banking industry and all like the announcements or like the anticipation of what's possible around partnerships. I don't think that we're necessarily in that place anymore. We're like, partnerships are great, and they're certainly meaningful to kind of get a foot in the door to kind of build out
audio.
Did you hear me?
No.
Can you hear me, Diggles?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Diggles?
Diggles might have lost audio.
We're all still here, buddy. He's not.
He's not. I guess I'll ask you, Ben, and we'll try to get Benjamin back. But can you just touch base? Like, I know Constellation has made headway over the past year and a half. I can think of like the relationship with Common Crawl, the relationship with Panasonic North America.
I think there's a
Forward
level.
Edge,
Yeah, there's kind of this like if you launched in early 2018 or 2017 as a token, you were bought into this framework or playbook that consistently launching partnerships would show adoption and momentum. And that was while the technology was being built. It's like, oh my God, look at all these things. And they had something to kind of ground it. What I've seen with communities now is they've been kind of demystified by it. Partnership announcements don't necessarily equal utility on the blockchain, or they don't really understand the dealings behind the scenes. And yet because those top 50 or top 100 tokens or ecosystems are still there, they're still recycling the playbook of the past, right? And there's not a one-to-one correlation. Oh my God, we did a partnership with JP Morgan, we did this. But they did that because that excited and gave credibility to developers to come in, which then would hopefully build the next killer application. And then another, news cycle would go through another partner, and you just have this like little flywheel that happened. But that's not going to work for forever, because developers are mercenaries in the industry. They've figured out how they can jump around, make a living by, winning hackathons, winning grants, whatever it is. And Constellation took kind of this hybrid approach, right? Now we started to do partnership announcements where we made sure there was a deployed metagraph. And that deployed metagraph was really a flag in the ground and offered as kind of like an MVP in early testing for that particular partner, right? Panasonic, Common Crawl, but this wasn't the total expression. And I think there's something that I think Diggles and I kind of wanted to open, just kind of level set with the community, is like what you see on the metagraphs is us trying to transform or pivot the industry to seeing, hey, this is just a flag in the ground. This isn't the full scaled solution. It's unlike a smart contract where that is the solution. You deploy it, that is what it is. And there's no ambiguity on whether that smart contract business will scale, right? Like think of ICOs, right? When you did a smart contract, you had 100 people locking up ETH and waiting to get distributed their ERC20 token, right? There wasn't like, oh, it could scale to 1,000 more token holders. No, that was the smart contract, and that was the purpose of it. But with the metagraph, what we want to do is, instead of saying, hey, here's a paper partnership, here's a headline, we want to translate that into the early expression so that people can follow our business development cycle, pipeline, maybe not pipeline, but at least kind of the early expressions. And because metagraphs are amenable and flexible, all these things can scale. But what's important is this kind of flag in the ground. It's our way of doing a demonstration of what a public network does. This isn't about public or private. We've gotten rid of that narrative, and really just kind of planting the seeds for what people can follow the traction through metrics, right? It's very obvious that some of these metagraphs aren't producing a lot of snapshots today, but it's allowing people to track our progress in a programmatic and transparent way. Diggles, do you want to go in?
Yeah. Sorry, I was having some audio issues. Why probably you guys asked me a question I didn't answer. So I'm back. Just going back to the summer statement, you said something that I think is worth pointing out, that these conversations weren't taking place 7 months ago. And I agreed with that, because from my perspective, even though we're in this summer lull, I'm more smitten. If it was the same way it was last summer, I would be depressed this year, but I'm more on the opposite side, which is more manic, because things are changing. The entire industry is changing. We, Ben and I, as you know, we spent some time with some attorneys at the beginning of this year, just some friendlies that are in our ecosystem from the Digital Chamber. And I'm not going to name names just to be kind to them, but they were talking about how M&A activity, a lot of these things, and how there's consolidation that they believe is going to take place in the next 6 to 18 months, maybe 2 years at the onset of 2025. And I said, well, what do you think is really holding it back? And he's like, well, when a company comes in, they say we want to invest in this blockchain project or this currency. They ask, is it legal? And if they don't have a clear answer, they're gonna wait. And so there's all this pent up demand that's staring at what's happening on the Hill to get in the game, which is going to really unlock not just us as a company, but let's look at like Hedera, Polkadot, look at IOTA. All of them have had to be really bolstered by the same adoption constraints from not being able to focus with the legacy. But those that know Constellation, that's been our focus since day one, is building trust and trying to bring these people into the fold. To your point, just kind of weaving into the metagraph piece, with Panasonic as the guy that manages the relationship and has been working with these guys now for three plus years, which is pretty far out, to get to where we're at, because this is a massive company. I think they're like a Fortune under 250 company. They've been around for 120 years. We have to move at the speed of them, but they're willing to kind of take a little bit of that risk to explore something that they believe is going to be transformational, not just within the areas that we're working on with the onset use cases, but holistically across their entire organization. We recently spent time with the North American president, and he's demonstrably was saying how excited he is about what blockchain can do to their entire footprint. That said, we have to move at their pace, and we may have not been all that clear about that. We have the plans to work within their upcoming marketplace so that we're standardized within the Tough Book as the first expression across their footprint. And that's coming out later this summer, early fall, but there's a lot of moving pieces on the Panasonic side that we can't force. So we decided last year, with their blessing, which we appreciate, was let's get a Metagraph up and running now. Let's get this thing integrated so that we can start interviewing folks like first responders and folks in the Army, folks with that work with the DoD that utilize this mission critical, tough, ruggedized Tough Book, and getting their buy-in. How do we get LOIs? How do we get folks showing that, yes, when this thing is up and running, that we can bring all those customers in to that Metagraph? But we had to get it out there to get it started. But now I feel like there's like folks saying, well, this is all we're seeing. It's like, no, this is part of the strategy. And we want to be transparent, but there's also being naked, right? I'm not going to get on every week and start sharing all of my roadmap tips and tricks and what I'm up against and how I'm doing it strategically with the support of Ben and team here. But that sort of answers why the Metagraphs are where they're at today, which I'm extremely excited about, right? And we have others that we're cooking up in the background, but we realize that this industry has, to Ben's point, or no, maybe it was Ryan's, about how you could mention a partnership in 2018, and that would give enough, I'd say pill out for about 6 months of excitement. Announcement-based marketing for crypto and Web3, it just isn't it anymore. It's going to be through the true demonstrable activity happening on these things, an announcement from the legacy, not from us and the legacy giving us a quote in like in a press release, but them going out there and saying, hey, this is what we're doubling down on today. So Ben, I'm happy to hand it back over to you, but if you'd like, I'm happy to share some of the learnings that we've had while working with enterprise in the last 6 months when it comes to unlocking the power of what the Metagraphs are going to do, not just only for the customers, but also our ecosystem.
Yeah, and thanks, Diggles, for that. When you kind of jumped off, what I was kind of level setting was how we're putting a flag in the ground, showing kind of early traction, what this looks like, gives people something tangible to feel, evaluate against, but this is not the full expression. None of these are really the full expression, but you can see how they grow over time, right? Think about it like on a cryptocurrency, except this is usage of putting verification and validations on chain through that metagraph, and how the metagraph transforms over time. And I think that's a big differentiator, as well as we're showing transparency across our processes. So when people start to think behind the scenes, this is the Panasonic deployment, it's only so many snapshots. That's the first expression. Our whole goal is to ramp up. There's no backdoor dealings going on at Constellation that we're getting revenue in a different way and siphoning that to ourselves. And thus it doesn't really correlate to snapshot usage. There's none of that going on here. What is actually going on is what Benjamin was describing. Is like, these are early iterations. We're starting to test the waters. This is new technology. It does add substantial value. And because it adds substantial value, you're going to start to see these metagraphs scale over time, which means more snapshots, right? Revenue, there's a connection to revenue to snapshots, right? When you're putting more data, you're using the network. Think of it as like a SaaS play, right? It's just in a different context that we kind of allow the ecosystem and community to kind of see in a transparent, meaningful way. So as these engagements go forward, more data will come on, more activations will happen within those different channel partners. It's not just one use case. It's hundreds, thousands of different partners that are going to start to unlock and use this value, which equates to having to use more snapshots on the network.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I do want to share some of the learnings because I think it's important that, validation is the core of everything we did. Everything you're saying right now has always been our vision, right? Like I encourage people to go back to like the 2019 coffee talks and whatnot, where we're like, hey, a digital smart check mark, the Intel Inside idea, blockchain as an API. How do we make this as easy to onboard people so we can get as much data validation as possible, which is good for everybody that's involved in this ecosystem. But some of the things that we've learned that have made some small course corrections along the way, because you don't know what you don't know when you're in an emerging industry. And one of the first things that we learned is that we thought that every corporation is going to want their own public network that they can manage. And what we've come to learn is they don't want to manage it, much like they don't want to manage their cloud providers. They just want to use Amazon Web Services, check that box, and now they're good. That's why there's been a move from on-premise, bare metal steel over into the cloud. So that was really great because it's much better for us to manage networks on behalf of the enterprise, right? The other thing is that we realized that, and this is not profound by any means, is that a metagraph is like a Ferrari, right? We always say you can't get anything less than a Ferrari with a 3-node metagraph. What a 3-node metagraph can do is pretty impactful for an organization. The problem with that is that if somebody only needs a VW Bug or a bicycle to go to the grocery store, sorry, you're going to have to get in a Ferrari to do so. So we started realizing that the bulk and big data activations are really the focus here. But that sort of broke our brain because we thought, well, we don't want to issue a bunch of blockchains, right? We don't want a bunch of blockchains. Well, I know that our community might say, well, you want as many blockchains as possible. Not really. What we do want is much volume as possible. And that may come through a single blockchain. And we did this through learning. This was a huge breakthrough for us, was containerizing customers within a single metagraph. Right now, for example, there's something we can handle upwards of 3 million cabins every month within first responder vehicles on a 3-node metagraph. That's insane, right? That allows us to have massive throughput on one metagraph. And of course, we probably wouldn't do that. We would have extra nodes just to make sure that this thing's comfortable, but to stress test that. But that also means that we have to kind of stack rank these different customers into that single containerized metagraph approach. The other thing we came to realize is that we thought everybody was going to want us to duplicate and store their data. They don't. We don't need to store their data, which is amazing. That allows us to only focus on the digital evidence, fingerprints, and the hashing of the data to be referential to where they're storing it. So when that data is up in the cloud, we know that if anything changes, we have that immutable ledger showing that record and that digital evidence has taken place. That's allowing us to go to market so much faster with customers, to the tune that now when we have somebody come to us and say, one of our requirements is for you to store our data, we're not touching it right now. We'll eventually get there, but we're not touching it. We also thought that everybody was going to want decentralized data storage. They don't. I'm not saying that there's use cases that don't merit this, like our partner Kinnemy over at the DoD, where you're dealing with really sensitive stuff that needs to be sharded and fragmented. Totally get it. But most folks are pretty comfortable with the security measures that they're dealing with when it comes to Azure, AWS, Google Cloud Platform. So that allows us to focus on our bread and butter, which is really around the validation, edge processing of data, and making it available for complex data streams and orchestrations. And the last thing I'll say that we've learned is that corporations don't seem to really care about staking. I mean, we thought that was going to be like a boogeyman, like, hey, what do you think about allowing the community to get involved? Great. It's no longer like this weird thing that we have to demystify. And to me, that's the most exciting thing, because our vision has always been about making DAG the centerpiece of our orchestration so that everybody benefits from the validation of mass data validation coming through all these metagraphs. So hopefully people can tell how bullish I am about this, because we've unlocked in the last 6 months through customer conversations something that's going to benefit the ecosystem, but this as a whole, but this largely separates us from the conversation when people are trying to compare us to other ecosystems that I just think that we're apples to oranges. But Ben, Ryan, I don't know if you guys have any opinions on that.
No, I think, I guess the one comment I would be, because I think I kind of sit in like an interesting chair and get to see a lot of kind of retail viewpoints across a lot of different networks. And I think, again, going back to one of the big things that we kind of talked about at the beginning, or that I prefaced with here, is that, like, yeah, it's great that we see all these partnerships, but how does that impact, like, how does that impact me? Like, let's say I'm involved in Network X, and Network X lands a huge partnership, but it has nothing to do with like anything really related to me. It's like, what? So like, and I think people have kind of gotten sick of being like, oh yeah, another announcement that really doesn't impact me at all. Like, and I do think there is something different when I think about the route that you've taken, or the architecture that's been built in with metagraphs, as actually kind of directly correlating to, hey, the more data, the more, the more volume on these metagraphs, the more kind of direct correlation into something that might be impactful for people.
Let's not like diminish completely the partnership. What did that serve? Well, in a publicly traded company, any sort of unveiling of customers would help the stock price or something like that. In crypto, it gave a hype cycle, right? Oh, this is going to be used, and we're going to have, there's going to be more usage, and that's going to give more credibility. And so, I think, bravely speaking, or being Constellation was brave to say, hey, when we're going to do a partnership, it's got to be a metagraph. You got to see some data and what it's doing. Even if you're not blown away by the first early expression, we're trying to create this hybrid approach, which we understand there needs to be excitement that gets people over to the chain, gets people using our technology, but at the same time, we've got to have a little more substance there. So this shift is kind of this hybrid area that we're kind of opening the kimono up, where many people are not, many other ecosystems are not. And guess what? We're going to get criticized when it's like, well, that metagraph's not doing a whole lot. It's like, wow, well, I think that's welcome to sales pipeline. Yeah. So there's a shift happening on the way that we market new relationships, new partners. We show transparencies in our sales workflows, how we see the evolution of technology. And I hope it becomes a new standard. That would be my goal, is that people start to, other communities get off of our back and go to other ecosystems to be like, we saw this partnership. How can you point to the transactions they're putting through the network? Right? How do you show the value there?
Well, and that's the big thing that I guess I agree with your point. I think that I don't want to diminish the importance of like partnerships that might not have direct like network impacts or direct, impacts on like the underlying asset of the network, because at the end of the day, it's better to have a foot in the door than not to have a foot in the door at all. I get it. But I also think like, if we're supposedly headed into this world where all assets are going to be tokenized, and blockchain and distributed ledger basically represent, the next iteration of the internet, I would hope that we start seeing some shit that actually uses blockchain and distributed ledger. Like if we're talking about it, then I would hope to see it being used. Even, and this is my personal opinion, having nothing to do, like, even outside of a media relationship with Constellation, Genfinity, any of this stuff, I would rather see small incremental utilization of a network and have that be impactful, and then be able to ramp that up, than just having something that's just for an announcement's sake. And then 3 years later, you have all of, myself included, and every community member and everything else being like, well, what happened to this partnership or this thing that was announced 3 years ago? I thought they were going to be doing X, Y, and Z, and they never did anything, because we never heard about it, because there was this pre-prepped press release, something came out, and then they're just gone. Like, I would rather see something that is like a stepping stone towards like actual adoption of the tech. So that's just me, though. But yeah,
I would love to point something there. Like, so I watched this video recently from one of the key Wired founders named Peter Layden. It was a free think interview. I'll send the link to it. It's 12 minutes, and it's really all about how, civilization is crumbling and all this. It's actually very positive. So I'm sort of teeing it up poorly here, but basically that 2025 is one of the most important years of humanity's lives. And it's been this pattern that we've seen with the Industrial Revolution, the Renaissance. Like there's these moments where there's this massive turning point, and this year is one of those years. And seeing that this guy has been tracking, technology for, I think, something like 40 years as a publication, he's got a pretty good leg up on it. And so we're feeling that uncomfortable burn right now of watching old systems fail, watching old things that just aren't working anymore, with all the hacks, all the weird stuff happening with money, cryptocurrency being like a Scud missile coming in and completely changing the conversation. Walmart being interested in doing their own real world asset tokenization or having a stable coin so they can cut out loyalty and reward vendors where they're having to do transaction fees, or credit card vendors, putting them even closer to being a better customer experience and engagement. That unlocks a whole world that has been sort of a whole canvas we haven't been able to paint with in the past, just because of these sort of middle-aged institutions that are now starting to fail. The other thing that's happening that's not profound at all is that trust is at an all-time low. I know I keep saying that, but I'm not trying to make this political, but what took place with this Epstein stuff just in the last couple of weeks is, we have all this evidence. We have this evidence. Now we don't have this evidence. That's fine. I don't care where you land on what fence here. The problem is that trust is at stake, and trust now is even lower in an entity than it was, 3 weeks ago. And when we can't trust organizations or government and all this stuff, it kind of leaves people in this frantic phase of like, what's next, right? And again, I'm a maximalist when it comes to blockchain and Web3, and I believe that it's going to help solve a lot of these issues. The problem is that Constellation, being an early contender in this space, has largely been shunned by many of these institutions that are now starting to fail and are scrambling to look at how can we regain that trust? How do we recreate pipelines for loyalty and engagement, right? That's one of the big things Ben and I are largely involved right now, which we're excited to expose to the community and the industry at large, which is this whole new breadth of life coming into the crypto sphere that isn't about just buying, trading, and selling cryptocurrencies on centralized exchanges. This is about activating a customer base that has technology fatigue. They don't want to deal with more stuff. So how do we get into the stakeholder economy and reward them demonstrably for their activity? Because people are tired of a lot of these kind of schemes out there that are just no longer working anymore, that are dying on the vine. And that's what's really largely going to separate those first movers, those bold companies out there that are willing to jump in and say, yeah, we see the forest through the trees on this. And we know that by getting some of these activities in the hands of our customers is going to leapfrog us, not just incrementally help us compete, but absolutely demonstrably change the industry we're in. And I believe because of this massive change that's taking place, that a lot of Fortune 500 companies are going to fail. They're going to go by the wayside because they weren't able to turn that corner fast enough. So Ben, I know that you're close to this subject around that real world asset tokenization. You're seeing the uptick in accountability. A good example being like a mining operation, because people understand gold, right? It's being exchanged somewhere on some market out there that's saying, here's the price of gold, here's the volume we have access to, here's the validity and the pureness of it. But there's nothing that's at the sensor level of the mine saying, yep, this stuff actually is this pure. Here's how much volume they have, and here's the value of it. So they may be getting taken to the cleaners, and people are starting to demand, hey, we want to have that transparency from the source level of real world asset tokenization, which I think is wildly exciting. So Ben, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, with the real world asset, I mean, well said, Benjamin. There's an industry that's booming there. Once again, how do you take going back to the why? The why has never been so clear. And I think that's valuable. There is a crazy value transformation that's happening. And we needed that bit of capitalistic greed to come in and say, the why is we're going to make more money. How do we unlock more value through X? Well, verification is proving how to unlock more value. And so when I look at real world assets, I look at it a different way. Real estate becomes one of them. We know the value of our house. We know that homes tend to appreciate in value over time. It's a consistent asset. You can get tax incentives. You can do write-offs against it. You can get loans against it and unlock more value. So that asset in itself has a very strong perceived value and realistic value. But what makes up that asset? That's where my mind goes. What is the metadata that verifies that that asset is what it is? Whether it's a house in the Philippines and I live in the United States, how do I know that that house is what it is when I can't go walk around the block and check it out and go through it with a general contractor? And I think that level of thinking is going to unlock the value of real world assets through verification. This is really starting to be talked about. I was at a talk last week. It was called Women in AI, and it was held in San Francisco. It included many different individuals, including NVIDIA and BlackRock. And while the whole talk was about AI, the woman at BlackRock was like, we're already exploring the intersection of blockchain and AI, governance, data verification, transparency. There is a strong overlap, and we're not ready to reveal that. So our thesis is still trending in that path. Now I'm going to kind of pivot or evolve this conversation is, where do I see the Constellation ecosystem going? I've been talking with Stardust Collective quite a bit. They're the ones that give out a lot of the grants. And they've had a pause on some of the grant distribution because we're starting to recalibrate how grants are given out. Do we just want to randomly invest in an application or push out a grant into a vertical or application that we don't totally understand? Do we know that they're the industry experts to be the winner in that category? And what I'm working with the Stardust Collective on is rethinking of how Web3 can morph into Constellation's core initiative of bringing institutional adoption. So how do we use Web3 to showcase an MVP through a metagraph, through data transparency, but then start to support the vision of verification, data validations through our institutional and commercial pipeline? And so we're starting to rethink that whole approach to grant distribution so that's more in line and more continuous between the efforts of Constellation Core, the vision of Web3 decentralization, and driving sort of a common vision versus just give out a grant, spray and pray, and hope you find that one killer app that transforms an ecosystem. I think we've gone beyond that today because that model has been so replicated, it's been so used that we have to look beyond that. So we're actively doing this to really kind of set a new tone on how our grants are given out, how that brings builders into core of Constellation, where they might be able to sell added value services by showcasing kind of an early expression on Web3. So these evolutions are going to really help in terms of how we see institutional adoption, how we start to see verification on chain, unlocking verification, and bringing solutions in a more streamlined capacity.
Do you think that this is a random question? Because I think that, from the grant standpoint, I think just across the board, we've seen that it's, I don't want to, maybe using the word issue isn't the best word.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, I got
it. So I guess my question real quick is like, we talk all the time about real world adoption, and like, I would almost rather see a real world business that maybe they need some of the stuff that they want to put on chain or on ledger subsidized at first, while they, kind of see the real impact that it has, and then just kind of, or at least the onboarding of like a real world business. Like, has that ever been something that could be done with like the grants, where it's like, okay, here's this entity that maybe if it's like a really small entity that's like, okay, it's going to cost 10 or 15 grand to onboard them or do the initial setup to do whatever they want to do, or some of their processes like start running through the network. Can we, eat that cost so that they can do it, and then, then they kind of start actually putting stuff on the network and not just like, hey, we want you to have a website in 6 months. And that's
right. You know what I think here's a trend that I think people need to be aware of is that in blockchain, the early developers didn't have to do a lot because it was so niche, right? I think 2016, 2017, part of 2018, it was still very niche. So you didn't need to have a lot, right? Now, how does that correlate to, let's say, venture capital? In venture capital, if you are a 2-time, 3-time entrepreneur, you can walk into a room because you've got success metrics behind you. And so the development ecosystem has not really evolved in crypto. People still think like, oh, I'm just raised on smoke and mirrors or do this. It's evolving to where you have to have some sort of metric to back up your vision. Or else there's like, well, can you get it done? Can you get it done in the time you say you can with the money you're proposing and the runway? And can you recruit the team? That's all happening in real time. And blockchain's still offering that, right? Like, so people need to start having real expressions, even if it's not perfect, to give people more confidence. Do you have this industry more confidence that you can do what you say you can in the time and the team that you believe, right? In the same way that traditional venture capital fundraising operates too. In traditional venture capital, if you come out and you're a first-time entrepreneur and you try to raise capital, it's freaking hard because you have no metrics, you have no backbone to legitimize yourself. So this is absolutely critical that ecosystems, not just Constellation, start to look at, hey, what did you do to get from A to B? Do you have some sort of metrics to back up your claims? If not, like, there's hundreds of thousands of people across the world raising money that are that have something there or have more experience or a better team. You got to find a way to cut through the fat.
It's interesting on the grant stuff that like this sort of became popularized through the cloud ecosystem when they all started offering cloud credits to come build on their solution, right? And that's sort of the translation. The difference is they're offering infrastructure at the hopes that once you're embedded, you'll flip over to a customer. Not a terrible strategy, but they all started doing it, every one of them. And then it created a bad, hey, once I'm done with Microsoft's BizSpark program and I've ran through their credits, I'm just going to switch my infrastructure over to Google's to start using their credits. I can tell you a tall tale sign of a project I'm not working with is when they say, we're evaluating what ecosystem we're going to build on based off their grants. I'm like, I'm sorry, like all these are vastly different, right? Like what we do is going to serve a completely different functionality than like a Polygon, but you're saying whoever gives you the most money, I can tell that's a dead project because they're not focused on the true project. We want to look at projects as partners. We're not here to just be like, here's an open kimono, here's some money, go do some stuff. But to Ben's point, how do we really get into those success metrics together and work as partners? Where can we help patch well? It may not just be money that you need. Maybe you need hands-on true developers, our top tier protocol engineers to jump in and help you tune something. We want to see you succeed, and we're willing to put those resources towards your product and your project. But I know we're running out of time. Ben, maybe we can touch a little bit on some last things here.
I think, let's, saving the best for last. Let's do an exchange update because everybody's just like holding on to dear life on what's the exchange. Let's be transparent. We're talking with crypto.com, Kraken. We've had great momentum going with them right now. Our team has put together a MiCA white paper to meet new transparency standards in the EU. We finalized that last week. So we restructured our old white paper. We will have a new one coming out that really speaks to everything that we're doing across the DoD, across enterprise, and across Web3. I'm pretty stoked about this. This will be really positive for our community, and I really like working with these organizations. We're not there yet, but we're moving fast. Now, what can the community do? It's very clear to me that how you get listed on an exchange, whether you're Fartcoin or DAG, is hype. It is hype. it doesn't have to be so complex as like, this is this ecosystem is solving world peace and just trust us. They operate on hype. They don't have to be true believers in the core technology. They are there to exchange digital goods in the face of cryptocurrency. So where we can use our community's help is build hype for Constellation. That doesn't mean lie and do stuff like that. It means show support, show backing, show appetite, get out there, be loud, but be favorable. These are good organizations that are going to help us platform us to the next evolution. So I'm very excited about this. We're working big time. This is where we need help from our community. Diggles, you want to add anything to that? Or
yeah, I mean, it just kind of reminds me of my call to arms at the end of last year, dude. We all, everybody's always ribbing us. Why aren't you doing this? Like, we're all in it together, right? But we've built that trust. I always say we may not have the biggest market cap, but a lot of Fortune 500 federals looking at us because we've garnered the trust. Now we're just working through that with Crypto.com and Kraken. And we really want Coinbase in short order. I mean, I want all three. And I think we deserve all three. We've earned our stripes, but it's tricky. And a lot of people are like, why? All these people are doing it. We're L0 standard. This is more than just DAG. This is part of every currency that's on our framework. So get excited about how this is going to open the doors through so many different things that are going to unlock liquidity and really cool things within our ecosystem. So I would say beyond just getting out your cheerleading outfit and rah with us, because we need it, and I'm right there with you, is just a little patience, because fast, cheap, and good, pick two. We want this to be as good as possible. This is taking some time. But we want all three, right? So having some patience, I think, is extremely important. But that's the only thing I want to talk on with the listings update.
That's a good point. Next month, I'll be judging at the On-Chain Base Summit. Base is a big priority over at Coinbase, starting to build inroads with those guys in a completely different fashion. We need positive support from our community. This is a big pivot. This isn't time to just be like, oh, well, transactions don't equate to this. This is like time to ramp up for what the next 5-10 years is going to be over at Constellation. This is not a time to just sit there and bitch about, the past. That doesn't even matter. That doesn't matter to anybody I talk to in this world. And it really deflates the energy that happens on the other side. So we are making inroads. I think this will be a very powerful sentiment. Like I said, exchanges, it's not complicated. They want to see that we have a strong community. They want to see they're active. They want to see that there is some hype behind that token, behind that company. We have our DEX coming out. That's rolling out. I would say within the next couple of weeks, you'll have a DEX in our ecosystem. Where Diggles and I are putting our heads together, and Alex Brandes, is how do we take a Web3 entity like a DEX and not isolate it to Web3, but bridge that into the emerging institution and commercial adoption, especially with a pro-crypto administration. This is exciting to me, right? We're not just thinking about what tokens are currently on Constellation, or can we bridge other tokens here, but what new infrastructure can we support in the real world? How do we swap loyalty tokens? How do we swap certain industry-specific real-world assets? All using the underlying technology of the DEX. And this is just an MVP. In many ways, this is how we kind of orchestrate our commercial and enterprise conversations.
And they want it, right? We've validated this with different enterprises. We want to do this. Going back to that Walmart example, if I was a credit card processor, I'd be a little worried about this stablecoin stuff coming on, because that's going to cut out a middleman in a meaningful way. And I think it's a beautiful thing. People now are going to be able to receive rewards on behalf of participation within their engagement of a brand in a way they've never experienced before, that they then can take to a DEX like ours and trade it for other stuff. I mean, it opens up a whole bunch of use cases, not to mention some of the shadow coin stuff. Maybe it doesn't even need to be expressible, but it's still can be using the rails of Web3 to move information, assets around in a meaningful way. I think we got burned a little bit on the real world asset tokenization when it came to NFTs. That was like the first expression, but it was a JPEG, right? So a lot of people had a bad taste in their mouth. How do we bring this into things that are those real world experiences? And I'll tell you what, people get it, and they're really pushing fast right now. This is a different year. And I'll leave it on this on my side is I am going to have Solomon here push that Wired Free Think interview so folks can kind of get a little bit of a sentiment of understanding why this is such a crux year, and that the legwork and all the stuff that we've done up to the 8 years prior to this is so meaningful into this new movement, especially artificial intelligence. Like that is going to be the thing that really helps pull a lot of this change agent activity through. So those are my final words, and I'm glad that we had a chance to kind of get on here and just talk through the summer lull and what's coming up in the second half of this year, baby.
I think, this is, I guess not, I don't know if it's advice from my end or not, but one thing that I do see pretty consistently is like, I think in this, like just in general, like if you're a huge advocate for any network in crypto, I think that we kind of take stuff for granted a lot because it's very easy to kind of get like kind of bored because you already know of everything that had already happened. But I think that's kind of a mistake too, because at the end of the day, like if you're doing a good job as an advocate, and even if you get one person that's interested, like there's tons of information to talk about for any ecosystem you're interested in. There's tons of information to talk about from Constellation standpoint. I just brought it up like an hour ago at the beginning of this. Like last year was Common Crawl, processing like 9.6 petabytes of data, like 95 or 98% of the world's AI models use Common Crawl. There's a partnership there. You have Ford.ai, you have Panasonic North America. So the point of that is like, you're not really doing that stuff for yourself when you're trying to be an advocate. You're trying to basically educate new people. And as much as like I hate conspiracy theory, and like the network that did that probably the best of community members is like the XRP community did a really good job at just recycling shit that was all the way back in 2014, 2015, 2016. It's like, if all of those integrations still somewhat exist, great, mention that stuff, because not everybody knows that. Like, you're not really talking to the other people that you like and retweet on Twitter. You're talking to the one or two people that haven't seen what's going on in Constellation or what any ecosystem you're excited about. So I actually see layer one networks doing this too, is like they won't talk about stuff that happened like a month ago, because it's like, okay, we're on to the next thing. But the thing a month ago was so big, and after 48 hours, nobody gave a shit about it. But it's like, yeah, but that was so big, you could have like literally created content off the back end of that for like however long. So yeah.
I'll leave it on this, and I know we're over, is like, yelling at another layer one or another ecosystem to do more doesn't help, right? It's like dating. You don't when you want to date somebody, you don't just keep bothering them, be like, hey, we want to hang out, you want to hang out, you want to use this. Like that didn't work for anybody. What a community needs to do going forward needs to champion the value of verification, the value of decentralization, and bang on that drum to the point that those enterprise institutions have no choice but to go, customers are demanding this. We have to make a shift. And that's happening, but it's happening in a slow roll because we get obfuscated through just the crypto and the greed. But now the why is there. As I said earlier, the why is there because the value transfer of legacy to X factor value of using blockchain and cryptocurrency is really there. And so I ardently urge the community to voice why it's valuable to all these partners to continue to evolve, to continue to use this, to continue to explore blockchain and emerging technologies like that. I think it'll make a more positive sentiment than just coming back to Constellation that has those relationships, and we are building those relationships that need to come from a customer demand as well.
Yeah. Hey,
thanks, dude.
As Ben mentioned, if Fartcoin can create a hype cycle,
It's time.
I can't believe you said that. Anyways, no, it's always awesome having you gentlemen up here. And hopefully we get some more stuff coming down the pipeline. I know that you guys have been battling the level playing field that is the crypto industry for quite some time. And hopefully there's some strides made there, but will be awesome to see what comes up with the metagraphs, as I think Mr. Diggles kind of alluded to some of the discussions that have been going on too, just kind of a foot in the door type stuff with the Panasonic NA metagraph, and I'm sure more. And yeah, looking forward to seeing everything else come out. As always, thank you guys. I think this is maybe only the second or third time I've had both of you gentlemen up here. Appreciate the audience for bearing with the Twitter issues and following on probably 6 different streams right now.
That's great.
But hopefully the updates come through, and stay with me, guys. I'm going to make sure I get this recording, and we'll probably end up pushing out a
great one. Solid. Thanks, Benjamin. This was fun.
Great job, guys.